The Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is one of the most significant and important series of events that has occurred to this planet. It has helped shape the way we live today. Over this period of time, it has grown from the fields of Britain all the way to the Bahamas. This presentation will show you how this explosion came to be. It all started with the birth of Parliament. Before Parliament, the British people lived in a monarchy where the king ruled with divine right. This meant that the king ruled because God wanted him to, that God chose him. This was hard to argue with because those who didn't agree were thought to be disagreeing or going against God, and because they lived in a time where religion was extremely important, it was difficult to speak out against. However, in 1215, King John ruled the entire land and everything in it. The king had the land divided into chunks, and each chunk he assigned a duke to control the land within that chunk. The land is again divided into chunks, and for each piece of land, a baron is chosen to oversee it. He is overseeing the vassals that work the land. So the vassals that work the land serve the barons, and the barons serve the dukes, and the dukes serve the king. So why does the king get to rule while the people do the work for him? Because he rules by divine right. In 12, all the dukes, barons, and especially the vassals were outraged by his unfair taxes and ruling. When it got too far, the barons revolted and captured London until King John agreed to sign a treaty saying that the king's power shouldn't be abused, and it gave people more power to do what they wanted. This didn't apply for the vassals too much, though, so they were still upset. The king agreed to a charter written by the barons that put certain taxing rules on him. When the Magna Carta was decreed, it gave the king taxing rules. Later on, the habeas corpus was formed to give the people a fair trial, not just going straight to jail or to be executed. In 1689, a Bill of Rights was created to separate the king's power and give it to a group of people who controlled law-making and tax issuing. This group was called Parliament, later led by Robert Walpole. Another group was formed to help solve disputes between Parliament and the king. This was the shift of power in England. When the power shifted from the king to the people, the church also got cut off. People were still very religious, but they had more freedom. But they didn't let it control it. Shortly after the reduced power of the monarchy came the Agricultural Revolution. Because of the reduced monarchy power, it made it easier for the vassals to get their ideas for improving and changing the way they grew crops. The king gave each vassal their own chunk of land to do agricultural experiments. The vassals would test new methods and strategies. Sometimes their tests would work, and others would adopt the new strategy for their chunks of land, and sometimes they wouldn't work and would have to start their crop over for the next year, fresh for the next year. During the time where the vassals had their land to experiment with, they discovered and developed crop rotation. Crop rotation is rotating your crop where you grow different crops each year. Let's say you grow corn in one spot one year, so next year you would plant it somewhere else. Each crops need different nutrients to grow, so by planting the crop in another area that's rich in the nutrients it needs to grow, it'll be bigger and better, and by the end of the rotation, the first spot you grew the crop in will have replenished those nutrients it needs to grow. With all the new food and easier ways to grow more, the population suddenly expanded it grew quickly. With the sudden explosion of population, this opened up cities. And in each city, there was someone who specialized in each specific area, for example. There would be a textile person and a shoe person and a person who made tools out of metal and a person who made tools out of wood. And there would be one of each person in these cities. The problem was that if there was someone better at you, let's say making textiles in the town next over, eventually people would start going to their textile place to buy better textiles instead of yours. So now you aren't getting much business at all, And that other neighboring textile worker sees that, so he comes over and teaches you how to make better textiles, and you get business back, and your business goes back up. However, he gets a cut of what you're making because he taught you how to do it. Eventually, he starts getting cuts of multiple people's businesses, and he's thinking to himself, I'm getting enough money from them, so why should I have to do work anymore? I'm going to pay them to do my job. And so now he supervises all the textile companies he gets a cut from, and those who work there become the employees. Then he starts getting tired of having to oversee so many shops, so he sets up a big shop or a factory and makes his workers commute to work every day. Then people discover how to harvest power from sources other than humans. The primary one they used was water. Factories would get set up by the river, and water would power machines that were made to help make textiles. Because of the machines, human labor was only needed to oversee them, so many people lost their jobs. The Age of Reason is called the Age of the reason it was called the Age of Reason was because people started to discover science. With science, people got an actual understanding of the world, and the reason for everything wasn't just God. There was huge fascination for science in Britain, and a group called the Lunar Society was developed. The Lunar Society met on a full moon, hence the name Lunar Society, because the moon light allowed the members to stay out later to talk. Then the moon would guide them home. They just talked about science. This was good because it allowed ideas to circulate around the scientific community and allowed people to get input on their ideas and improve them. Because of this, the Industrial Enlightenment began. During the Industrial Enlightenment, they discovered coal. Britain was right above a major coal bed, and they were able to build pitheads near the ocean. This was great for transporting the coal across the sea, and they had lots of it. Coal is what kickstarted the revolution because it was so useful and easy to access. The first problem they ran into, the deeper they dug, the more it filled with water and became an issue. So they created a horse-powered machine to get water out. Eventually, it was too much for the horses, so a man named Thomas Newcomer created a pump that used steam power by burning coal. It worked extremely well in terms of getting the water out, but because it used so much coal, he was using it up just as much as they were getting out. Apart from the coal machines, Britain was bursting with new inventions for day-to-day use, like the toilet, like a flushing toilet. With all the new inventions, some great wealth came for Britain. The British idea of wealth was that new inventions and discoveries created more wealth. They don't think that there is a set amount of wealth and that you can't create more, and that you can create more. The French, on the other hand, believe that there's only a certain amount of wealth in the world, and that the wealth is divided amongst the nations. If you look in terms of it, for example, pie, France think there is only one pie, the pie being wealth or money, and that each nation has their own slice or share of the wealth. The only way to get more is by taking part of someone else's. Britain, on the other hand, thinks that by inventing and discovering, you can create more pies. The reason these views are so different is because of the way each of the countries are run. Britain is currently in the Age of Reason, where they're making scientific breakthroughs and new discoveries. They have the Lunar Society just to talk about science. It's a free and open conversation in Britain, but in France, it's another story. They, too, have a place where scientists can meet, but it's not open to anybody, and the government censors what gets released to the public and what doesn't. Part of this is because the French government still has a significant connection to the church, and the church wants people to stick with the belief of God, not science. This also is a matter of where the French and British each invest their money. Because the French think that wealth is gained by taking others, they invest in their military. The British, on the other hand, invest in science because they believe that their wealth is gained by discovery. They also invest in their navy because they're surrounded by water, so the navy is their primary way of war. The navy was a good investment. During the 7-Year War between Britain, France, and Spain, Britain conquered very much. The British Navy was so strong they defeated France and Spain no problem. This meant that Britain basically controlled the ocean, which was huge because that opened up for easy trading. They could still cross the ocean without having to. They could sail across the ocean without having to worry about an enemy ship taking their stuff. The easy access to trading made the triangle trade possible. The triangle trade was a trading triangle created by Britain, Africa, and the Americas. The Americas had lots of resources, so they would send resources to Britain, and Britain would make things and send manufactured goods back to Africa. Guns, cloth, iron, and beer to Africa. Africa would send slaves to the Americas to do the labor of getting resources. The Americas would also send tools to Africa. Also, North American colonies would often ship raw resources to slaves and planters in the West Indies. In the West Indies, they would grow what is known as cash crops. Cash crops are crops that people grew for money, often cotton and coffee and tobacco. Another industrial revolution breakthrough is happening in Britain. James Watt had an idea for an efficient steam engine pump he wanted to build. This design was perfectly fine. He just didn't have enough money to build it. So he established the help of Bolton. The two had a good relationship. Bolton was eager to help. Bolton ran Soho Factory, and together Soho Factory and James Watt produced the steam engine. This steam engine used a quarter of the coal used to, and factories were able to use the steam-powered pumps within the factory. Soho Factory became the very first steam-powered factory ever. So now that there's so many factories popping up, they needed to be easy to get coal and other resources to the factories. But all the roads are maintained by the churches, and so all the roads lead to all the roads lead to the churches. To get the resources to the factories, oftentimes you would have to go down tons of unnecessary roads. So the government decided to let the people build their own roads and maintain them, and charge people a toll to go over it. Soon enough, there were roads popping up all over Britain, but these roads were very poorly maintained. A man named Josiah Wedgwood petitioned to Parliament for them to build a toll road. This road would connect Potters to the new and expanding road network. There was over 315,000 miles of roads that suddenly expanded the trade network. Then Wedgwood proposed yet another idea for the Parliament to build canals. The canals were a much smoother ride and an easier way to transport goods. It also turned out to be more efficient. It took 7 years to build by hand and went across many rivers. Wedgwood is now one of the most richest men in the country, and he discovered something called consumerism. Banks and stock exchange had been developed, and suddenly people had money to spend in the middle class. He took this as an opportunity to develop advertisement. He took advantage of the time when the Queen wanted a new tea set. Wedgwood sold his one set, and it soon became known as Queen's Wear, and everybody wanted a set.